I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on this episode of the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth, and today I have a full table, all engineering types. To my left, the Assistant Director of Engineering, popular guest on the show, Joe Thielen, Senior Ballistician, Jayden Quinlan, sitting across from me, and back in the corner, back by popular demand, a little bit of a hiatus, we've got engineer Ryan Damman. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Sure thing. Good to be here, Seth. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. And I'm excited to talk about this topic specifically because it's been on our to-do list since we started the podcast. It's been on the back burner. But we couldn't really approach this topic and give our listener the full picture of the development and all of the technical aspects and all of the deep divey stuff without first covering our drag variability reduction technology, which during the ATIP development, the DVRT, that's where we really found, yes, okay, we can control this variable, and by controlling that variable, it gives us this benefit. And we couldn't talk about that, waiting for that patent that was pending. Patent was issued, and then what do we do with it? So recently, just within the last few months, we have come to the public with our DVRT, that drag variability reduction technology, the very specific geometry of me-plat, flat diameter, as a relationship to the bullet diameter, and how we can manipulate the the shot-to-shot-to-shot variation in drag. So if you haven't, as a listener, you need to go back and educate yourself on DVRT. We've got podcast episode number 127 out there, and a whole bunch of other videos on YouTube explaining what it is. We compare it to BC variability, who benefits from it, how far do you have to shoot to see the benefits. So some homework before this episode for the listener. Make sure you're brushed up on DVRT. And then also hit probability. That was episode 129 here just a couple weeks ago. The ATIP helps you hit more targets more often because of that drag variability reduction technology. And that plays right into hit probability. What are the odds you're going to hit what you're aiming at? So brush up on those. And then really to get all the way into ATIP bullets, we have to go back into the 90s. I was perusing some old product catalogs from, I don't know, Joe, this was before your time by a lot, but you probably remember them. Early 90s, we had the National Match bullets, and those were aluminum tips. And that's one of the, you look at an ATIP, you know it's an ATIP because you don't see aluminum tips on a bullet anywhere. So going back clear into the 90s, we were doing aluminum tip bullets. Why would a ballistician want to use aluminum in the first place back in the 90s?
Well, so if you go dissect, I know exactly what bullets you're talking about in the National Match, and they're a unique looking projectile for sure. They were using a drawn aluminum tip that was larger and hollow. So the whole thing they were trying to do was the same thing we accomplished later on with the ATIP, is they were trying to manipulate the center of gravity, center of pressure, basically the balance of the bullet and the forces, right? The aerodynamic forces. Mm-hmm. So they could try to build a bullet that had less drag. I'm sure they were looking at net drag, as we talked about.
Yeah, BC values.
BC value, because those bullets got long bow tails, secant ogives that are long, but they were trying to accomplish the same thing, because aluminum is great, right? It's lightweight, can put it on the end of a bullet.
And strong.
And strong, yeah. It doesn't deform from heat or forces or pressure or anything like that. So it's lightweight. It allows you to extend the ogive. You can machine it to exactly what you want. It's just a good material for a tip material for a projectile.
Now, fast forward, obviously, we have our ATIP bullets, and we went with aluminum for a lot of reasons, and some of those reasons probably not why a ballistician in the early 90s at Hornady would go with aluminum. And maybe, one, they probably didn't know exactly what they were seeing. They were looking at net drag measured with an old school chronograph at 200 or 300 yards. Do you think the machining aspect of aluminum, because those bullets really didn't stick around very long? I mean, they were out there. I think we had them maybe a year or two, and then they're pulled out of the lineup. Do you think it was because machining?
Well, they weren't machining them. They were drawing them.
Oh.
So they were like a copper thin material that they were actually drawing or forming instead of machining. So they were pretty limited on what they could do. Your thickness of material, the shape you needed, and then you kind of got what you got.
Yep.
So it's kind of an apple and an orange compared to
Sure.
jumping into modern day A-tips in the
Sure.
15, 16.
We see a snapshot of, hey, maybe this, kind of aluminum tip technology could be useful, gets pulled out of the lineup, and then, you go, all of our tipped bullets, the VMAX, the SST, the Interbond, all those bullets. Well, then you hit, we've talked about it a lot, you hit 2014 timeframe, purchase of the Doppler radar, and then you see a dramatic, I'm going to call it explosion of not only new product development, but also just internal discovery, using that radar to find different ways to manipulate bullets and change things. And there was a lot of wasted shots, a lot of shots where, oh yeah, we learned that you can do this. We don't want to do that, but we learned how to do it. So there's a lot of that going on. So Jayden, Joe, Ryan, you were in on this as well. Starting in that 2014 time frame, was an aluminum tipped bullet talked about then when you were starting to work with the Doppler radar? You're discovering the heat shield tip. Was that something that you guys were working on, because the 2019 launch of the A-tip, we're talking half a decade earlier. Was that in the conversation at all back when you were first testing with the radar?
I remember with Emery, we wanted to put aluminum tip bullets back in 2008, 9, 10, 11. We want to do it.
Always wanted to.
Wanted to do it. The problem is what you were alluding to earlier is the machining, the screw machines, or the machining capability and efficiency and speed to build those little metal parts has gotten so much better in the last 10 years, right?
Okay.
So it used to be cost prohibitive in the early 2000s, the 90s, whenever you want, to machine those tips to what we want. Because those tips are obviously all machined, different caliber of bullet, take a different tip, different shape. I mean, we did all that on purpose.
Right.
So for us to get all those different flavors would have been very, very expensive when I started here.
Got it. So you fast forward a little bit, the machinings get a little bit better. You're seeing the Doppler radar data come in. You're working on a heat shield tip and an expanding bullet like our ELD-X. Was the aluminum tip part of that conversation early on?
Well, I think you have to cover some of too. Like if you throw it back to the 90s are where you really start to see tipped bullets hit the market in a mass production way.
Absolutely.
I didn't reference this before I came up here, but I remember Remington had like the bronze tip.
Yep.
I think that was late 80s, early 90s.
Late 80s or 90s.
Don't quote me on that.
I remember those bullets. You had a silver tip.
But why, that brings up the question, why go to a tip at all? And that's because you can kind of extend your ogive profiles beyond where you can just traditionally draw up the ogive shape of, say, a bowtail hollow point or something along those lines. And so in the 90s, you see that, the bronze tip stuff, we did the national match aluminums, and then you start seeing polymers messed with. I think the VMAX and SST would have been late 90s, early 2000s.
So the SSTs were in the early 93, 94, 95 is when Johnny P made the first of those.
Yeah, so you see kind of that start to be an explosion of tipped bullet production.
Yeah, which is weird because that's the standard now.
Right.
Especially for terminal performance, it's polymer tip.
Yeah. And so when you fast forward to 2014 when we got the radar, you kind of have to reference that point in time against that historical timeline of polymer tips or tipped bullets in general have become a standard, right? As of 2014, line in the sand. At that point, it was kind of the small tweaks to improve performance, and that's where heat shield tip came from. But yeah, to your point, Joe, I mean, you guys had been wanting. I mean, the 750 AMAX has had an aluminum tip for a long time, and the benefits of that aluminum look how big that tip is. You can't make that thing out of other materials cost effectively and in a producible way where it works. Like aluminum just fills that role.
Yep.
So yeah, as far as in 2014, I think we had wanted to, but we were wrapping our head around what the capabilities of the radar were in 2014.
Sure.
You get this shiny new toy that gives you way more information than you've ever had before. The first problem is, what do you do with all that information? And back then it was still the BC era. So we were using it to gather more accurate BCs downrange. And then those BCs weren't what we thought they should be. And oh, by the way, the tips are deforming. That whole time frame. I think we did a podcast on
that. Absolutely. Yeah. And what I was kind of alluding to or hoping that you guys would have some information on was, okay, we know a polymer tip does really well ballistically and it does well terminally. Did you guys explore aluminum in making the ELD-X? Because there's some confusion, and we addressed it in the podcast earlier on about the ELD-X, that the ELD match, our goal was to design the ultimate match bullet. It's actually the opposite. Our goal was the all-range hunting bullet, and then the ELD match was just a corollary. We have this technology, let's make a match bullet with it as well. But the ELD-X came first. Did you explore using aluminum in that capacity?
No, not really, because of the terminal nature, to your point of the ordering of those two projects. We set out to make a hunting bullet that defied the limitations that existing bullets had in that era. You could shoot an animal up close with it and it wouldn't come apart, and you could engage an animal at whatever range beyond traditional that is for you, and the bullet worked terminally.
Yeah, and it was match accurate.
Yeah, and the polymer tip was the vehicle to get there.
Okay.
I think that would be a pretty tough order to try to do with aluminum.
Yeah. So the terminal performance capacity, obviously you get the ballistic nature, but you don't get consistent terminal performance.
Right.
Is that because it doesn't compress?
Just a note on that, like when we, back to that time when we first realized our tips were deforming, we got the radar. We had an ELD-X at that point that we thought we were happy with the tip material we had at the time. And then when we changed to the heat shield material, we had to make an adjustment to the jacket construction and then how that core fit around the tip at that point to get that harder heat shield material to work at that time. So even with that material change, it was an adjustment to get expansion back to where it needed to be.
Okay.
We knew trying something with aluminum at that point was...
Because it's even harder than
it's
the
even
polymer.
harder. It's going to be harder to get that tip to set back, especially at low velocities.
Yeah.
And you learned that when you were putting, because I know the early ELD-X's had softer material in them.
It was like FTX tip.
It was
Yep.
elastomer type material. We tried those. So we basically were learning a lot like, hey, what are our boundaries here? Super soft. So
Got it. So aluminum tip bullets not recommended for terminal performance. So you get the ELD-X project across the finish line, and same thing with the ELD match. You have the ELD-X, the heat shield tip, these longer ogives, longer boat tails. We can make a really good match bullet. You do that. At what point in that process did you start to recognize that you could manipulate the variability from shot to shot to shot to shot in regard to drag with the shape of the tip? Did some of that start to form early on?
Well, when heat shield tip was kind of finished up, we had fixed the deformation of the tips due to aerodynamic heating. That problem was gone, and that was a loss in your raw aerodynamics, right? You were giving up BC numbers because of the tip deformation thing of the old tips. Heat shield tip fixed that. We started. It was through the use of the finalized heat shield tip products, ELD-X and ELD match at that time, that we started to see the drag variability correlation thing show up. It was through the use of those products.
Okay, so starting from, say, 2015, we launch them out to, say, maybe 2017, we're using these things. That's, I think, been very clearly put out on this podcast that we are using this stuff.
We're shooting hundreds and thousands of these, and thousands of these bullets.
So in the use, we found, okay, we can do this. And I know Dave Emery was still here for that initial, hey, I think we can control the variability by something with the me-plat. So and he retired in 2017 from Hornady. So it was in that 2016, 2017 time frame after several years of shooting these that you started to see.
Well, we didn't come up with targeting the me-plat.
No, but you saw you could control it somehow.
Well, it was like a no man's land landscape.
Yeah.
There was no I think it's this. There was plenty of that, but there wasn't one instance of that. It was first. It was and I think we talked about it in the DVRT podcast. Was the association of shooting groups at long range while running the radar and seeing that random shot that goes high or goes low or whatever. When you go back and pull the data out, you can see that shot's an anomaly not only on target but also in the radar data. And so once we saw that, then it was a pursuit of trying to figure it out. But that pursuit was, we tried everything.
Yeah. I remember coming on board to the ballistics team in 2017 after Dave's departure that, between 2017 2018, you had made some, I'm guessing lucky guesses or something. I don't know about guesses, but hey, we need to go, next time we go for a radar trip, we're going to do this testing and this testing. And it seemed like the duration of time might have been long, might have been a year and a half, but the amount of testing trips, those were only once every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, maybe. So the amount of testing it took to get down there actually wasn't as long as the time would indicate, because we weren't testing this all the time. You know, you have 95% of your job has nothing to do with long range ballistics. So you can only focus on that every so often, every 2-3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
But I do remember taking part in some testing with Ryan, with you, where you would finally kind of seemingly crack the nut that, hey, we found this anomaly and now I found a way to control it.
Redefining varmint hunting and target shooting. The Hornady ELD-VT. ELD-VT bullets feature the heat shield tip, which resists the effects of aerodynamic heating. The lead core has been moved rearward, producing enhanced in-flight stability. AMP bullet jackets are used to ensure every ELD-VT bullet performs at its peak potential. The dual-purpose bullet for varmint and target shooting. ELD-VT bullets from Hornady.
Yeah. Well, the day it happened, I know, Joe, you've talked about that day when we were at the range and figured out that if we flattened the tip off, that fixed it.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, you know, that initial stuff, and then it became defining all those metrics that
what was the knee in the curve? Where's the optimum at?
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So that was with polymer tips, but also I remember it had to be 2018 timeframe, starting to play around with aluminum. And Joe, I know that was a big source of research for you and also for Ryan, because Ryan had to make the machine run. You had to make the bullet press, make bullets with the tip in there, and you had to, how do we make these? Do you draw them? Do you get them turned? How fast can you turn them?
We looked at heading them. We looked at
heading them early on. Back to the earlier in the conversation, we looked at heading them back in the first days of radar. And that was early on. It's like, you can't cold head these. They can't hold the corners we need. They can't hold the tolerances we need. So aluminum tips aren't going to work because machining them just not cost effective at that time.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, and that's kind of where it comes back around is once we start getting the breadcrumbs of what becomes DVRT, we started messing with machining aluminum tips because we could control everything. Compared to like a polymer tip that's molded, that's pretty expensive to go changing things on. You know, the changing of dimensions of a mold.
Just for all of our trials, we had all these different trials and nose radiuses and flat diameters, and so we'd turn those
needle point.
We could turn all those different geometries because you can't, like you said, you can't make a mold to inject those parts just for a trial run. So through that, we started learning all these things about making aluminum tips and how to make bullets with aluminum tips.
Yeah, and by the time you hit that 2018-ish timeframe, machining technology had changed enough that, you know, what you had mentioned, Ryan, was a tossed away idea. We can't head them. It's too expensive to machine them. You know, 3, 4, 5 years prior to that 2018, that had changed. I mean, we got to the point where we had made all these different prototype bullets to define what is now DVRT. And then at the end of that, we kind of reassessed and said, we might be able to run aluminum in a tip now. Like you can actually make it in a way where it doesn't break the bank to produce the bullet.
In that vein, bullets are expensive as a consumable, but we were seeing some of our competitors selling match bullets that had no significant change since the 80s for not much less than we would be able to sell an aluminum tipped bullet at the cutting edge of ballistic science. So with the cost thing, it was like, well, we're at a point now people are paying almost that much anyway for a hollow point boat tail. I think
that's kind of what kicked it over the edge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you get tips, you try all these different profiles, and the DVRT thing kind of separate now. We'll kind of depart from that because once that was like, okay, this is how we turn it on and off. We file for the patent. That change was immediately made to the ELD-X, ELD match bullets. And then the A-tip bullet became, hey, this is going to be a new product for us. This is going to be a whole new line of bullets. It has to have that very specific geometry on the nose to help reduce the drag variability.
Well, and it had to have geometry that people never even see inside the bullet. Because you were playing with where's the center of gravity, where's the center of pressure. 'Cause I remember doing that. Okay, what does this do? Change it in SolidWorks, change it into modeling, So that was a lot of fun that people don't even see it, because the shank of the bullet's down in the...
Let's get into that, because that's a point of ballistics that most people don't understand, is that where that lead lays and the thickness of the jacket and what the tip is made out of, that can really dictate some of its ballistic performance. And what kind of iterations did you go through testing that? Is it by caliber? Do you have an idea where to start? What is that? Do you move it back? Do you crowd the tip with the lead? Just in regard to the weight distribution, what does that look like, and how did that benefit the A-tip specifically?
Well, that's where Ryan did all the heavy lifting on that. Because you had core seat. I just remember you had core seat punches, edge finishes. You had tooling to try to keep separate in all those machines to make tip A, tip B, tip C, to fit them in there. And I know that was a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Because we were changing all kinds of stuff on the
Ryan's just like, leave me alone. Yeah, can you make this? Can you do this? Guys, let me get this done first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, luckily we had, this even tied back into what turned into ELD-VT now, with keeping bullet footprint the same, taking core weight way out. You got to move your center of gravity way back on the projectile. All that kind of tied into where we ended up with A-tip too. And so, yeah, we had all these different versions of, say, a 187 millimeter with a 150, 160, 170, 180 grain bullet, but in that footprint. And then core seat punches, do you want it tight around the tip? Do you want a large cavity of air behind the tip? So, and a lot of that was, we could test it in-house at the time, luckily. But yeah, we not even mention all reps in the manufacturing side too, of getting the perfect looking
they got to look good
externally.
Yeah,
was a whole other path we could go down. But yeah, it was just a lot of trial and error. And
well, how many iterations would you say we made? If you guys had to guess. I mean, if you picked on 6.5s where we started, I'll bet you we made 20, 30.
That wouldn't be out of reality there. I mean, that's somewhere in the ballpark.
So you're talking 20 or 30 iterations of a 6.5 153, and then you got a 135 and a 6 millimeter and a 22 cal and a 30 cal and a 7 millimeter and the big caliber stuff.
Yep.
So that's one thing that maybe some of our consumers might not understand, like the weight of a projectile. Sometimes we have a weight in mind. Okay, we need 150 grain 30 cal SSD, that gets the standard. You're going to have a 165 grain bullet for a 30-06, whatever. Largely with the match bullets, specifically with the A-tip, the weight is just a corollary. It is an insignificant result, somewhat significant result of the geometry. And that geometry was specifically chosen for its ballistic efficiency, and the weight just happened to be the weight.
Yeah.
It could have came out whatever.
This much copper and lead and aluminum weighs this much. Okay, we don't care.
Yeah, we want this shape, and we want this core layout.
This performance, yep.
And I think that's an interesting piece, that you end up with a 153, and now there's half grain bullets or whatever. And we often joke we need to come out with a metric set, or come out with the 11/16 bullet. So this one's 153 and 11/16. And but those weights are really just a result of the performance that we're after. We get the performance we want. The weight is what it is.
Yeah, because a lot of times, like you described, if you pick the weight in the beginning, you may have to sacrifice some other attribute of the bullet to make sure it's that weight, whether it's shape or whatever it may be. And we don't do that. The weight is only a beneficial aspect. We don't back ourselves into a corner with the weight.
Right. So there is, when you're looking at drag or BC, there is a weight aspect to BC. So generally, obviously heavier is better. When you guys are playing around with that core height, I say playing around like it's like you guys just are jacking around, but no, when you guys are testing those different core layouts, what are you specifically trying to obtain? Is it dynamic stability? Is it raw net drag? What are you trying to adjust with that core layout? Say on a 153 grain 6.5, which was one of the first ones we built.
And well, in general, when you move the center of gravity to the rear, bullets behave better dynamically in super simple terms. The damping characteristics are more favorable. So any angle of attack that the bullet has due to its muzzle exit condition or whatever, typically will get smaller faster.
Good.
Is just generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And so to Ryan's point, like the ELD-VT bullets also, the concept of those came out of this era where we were taking, these very aerodynamic shaped bullets of the time and just cutting the core weights back to induce that center of gravity moving to the rear and doing testing with those. The ELD-VTs aren't just that. We had learned some other things that we incorporated into those bullets as they exist today. And then the other part of it was the aluminum tip. And a lot of people have asked me, well, going from a polymer tip to an aluminum tip, isn't aluminum heavier than polymer? Wouldn't that shift your center of gravity further forward? Like, isn't that the opposite of what you're saying? And it would be true if all those things were equal, but they're not. The aluminum tips are not the same dimension as the polymer tips. And one of the benefits that we realized was we can go to a longer tip and customize the geometry of each one of those tips because we're turning them compared to a polymer tip. And the longer that tip is, the farther from the bullet nose the center of gravity becomes, even though the densities of those two materials are fairly similar. I mean, aluminum.
Well, and you're changing your center of pressure too.
Yes,
when you start
yes, you
monkeying
are.
with the tip geometry, you're
That's
changing
right.
center of pressure.
Yeah. So those shapes, those weights, the core layouts, not an accident, heavily tested specifically. And like you're talking dynamic stability, many folks have probably heard the term going to sleep. And that's in very much layman's terms what you're referencing.
That's right.
Yeah. Get better dynamic stability. The bullet's going to dampen out quicker. And that's part of the secret sauce. When we first were designing these bullets, we get some, like I'm going to call them pilot runs done. You make 5,000 bullets or something like 10,000 bullets. You start sending them out to people and you don't say anything. You say, hey, keep your mouth shut, sign this NDA. I want you to shoot these bullets. And initially the reports were, I don't know what you did to these. All I did was drop them on top of my old match load and they're shooting absolute bug holes not at 100 yards or not just at 100 yards, but at 500 yards, 600 yards, 800 yards. Just holding waterline is the standard now. Every bullet trying to eat the other bullet just on top of each other. And part of that secret sauce is that unique core layout, center of pressure, center of gravity relationship that really was dependent on using aluminum as the tip. Because again, like you mentioned, you can make it a little bit longer. And we're talking little bits. We're measuring things in thousandths, tenths of a thousandths. Like this stuff isn't, visually not necessarily that much different. But those little things, they make a difference. And I don't remember who you sent them to first, but before we had them as like an official product, I remember you coming back, hey, I sent them to, I'm guessing, Clay Blackett or Austin Orgain or Tate
some
or
of the
Wade.
first guys to shoot them, yeah.
Yep. And getting the reports back that it was great.
Yeah, those were really fun times.
Yeah.
At least for me anyway, when we started getting the feedback rolling in, like we knew what we had seen, but now you go independently. I mean, those guys, they're shooting. They're not looking at radar data and everything.
They're better shooters than us.
Yeah, that might be true.
Yeah.
We'll never admit it though.
Yeah. So, we do all of our internal testing and shooting. And Jayden, I think we ran the Sawash Colorado PRS match, and maybe it wasn't that match. Somebody was running A-tips.
I was running.
You were running
the prototype ELD-VTs
T's,
back then.
Yep.
You were running
I ran some
153s.
Yes, I ran some of the
and
first
I remember a couple
A-tips.
people. Hey,
Hey,
what kind of bullets are those?
Can't look.
Yeah.
Put the wrong color tip in it. They're the same thing.
Yeah. So like I remember that match and yeah, okay, the performance was good, but then you start sending them to podium level competitors and they don't owe us anything. And their text messages are, how can I get more of these?
Yeah. I don't know what you guys did, but these are the best bullets I've ever shot. Yeah, that was cool. That was fun.
That is, unique. And then, so we've talked about the technology where the weight, the core layout, that kind of stuff, the dynamic stability. When we talked about it early on, but now you compound that with the drag variability reduction technology. And that takes all of that technology with dynamic stability and such, and then you throw on another level of consistency. And that's why you're getting amazing performance, super jump tolerant, shoot them, anywhere off the lands, almost any velocity, out of any barrel, and they just stack up. And then when you start to push the time of flights, they just stay tight.
Yep.
And that's one of the differentiating factors between the A-tip and any other match bullet from any other of our competitors. The ELD match bullet, an awesome bullet, and it still incorporates the DVRT. But when you start looking at competitor match bullets, they don't have that type of technology that helps them shoot smaller groups at longer ranges.
Did you know that Hornady has a full line of reloading tools and equipment? Whether you're brand new to the reloading game or a seasoned veteran, we have tools that will work awesome with your setup. Check out all of Hornady's reloading tools at Hornady.com.
Yeah, typically with like a bowtail hollow point style design, the only way you can get, because the aerodynamics of the A-tips are very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, they're unrivaled with bullets that are available. So with a traditional bowtail hollow point, which is kind of the legacy long range match bullet design, right? About the only way that you can try to get to that level of aerodynamics that the A-tip has is to go with a very long ogive, very long bowtail, which happens. That's fine. You can do that successfully. But where compromises start to be made is where they start to point up the nose, the me-plat of the bullet very, very tight, because that causes your high Mach number drag to go down. Your BCs go way up there.
Mm-hmm.
So
looks good on the box.
It looks good on the box. You can get a BC that's, as high or say higher than an A-tip for the one published value. But the downside is that the drag variability of those bullets goes way, way up. And the aerodynamic benefit that you saw at high Mach number is sacrificed at low Mach number.
Mm-hmm.
But that story isn't really told as far as a label on a box. So
right.
you kind of saw that response from many of the bullet makers. And I think when A-tip came out, we saw a lot of bullet designs hit the market post A-tip that seemed to target them, right? Like we all do that. Like this is America.
Coopetition.
We're trying, absolutely, it's a competition. Who can make the best product? So I totally get it. But we have observed that can be the downside of pursuing it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so as a consumer, if you don't educate yourself on this stuff, you're looking at BC box values.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might choose the higher Mach value BC because it's pointed up needle tight. And then the other thing with both the hollow points, we see lot to lot variation be more considerable than something like this, which is machined
100%.
perfectly every time.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you guys round out the lineup. You come up, okay, we got the initial launch, and we've got a pipe hitter. We got the 90 grain 22. We got the 110 6mm, which is arguably, in my opinion, the best A-tip we make because that one benefits me the most as a competitor. We've got two awesome options in 6.5. We got the Juggernaut 7mm. We got those 30 cals that just look, those things are insane. And then you go with the big stuff. So we come out with our initial launch of what we're going to do. We've done some pilot runs. We've sent them to unbiased third parties, and they want more of them. Well, now comes the challenge of, one, okay, we make tipped bullets. We're really good at it. I would say the best at it. And the process of feeding a tip into a bullet and making it look nice, and people think, the tips could come out. No. If you've ever taken a polymer tip bullet that Hornady makes and you can get that tip out, not going to happen. The way that we finish those up, it's perfect. Well, feeding that polymer tip in there, it's a proprietary process that we have. I'm guessing maybe isn't the same or had some added complexity compared to aluminum. So I'd like Ryan to talk a little bit about what he can, some of the hurdles there. And then Jason comes up with, hey, I want these things packaged sequentially off the press. I want a tray of 100 to have 1 through 100. And if you buy a 500 bullet sleeve, I want 100 through 500 sequentially, never touched. That's a tall order because that's never been done before. So, Ryan, there's some manufacturing hurdles from the engineering side that had to seem pretty steep because it's cool to have guys like Joe and Jayden. Oh, yeah, we got this awesome product. It's going to light the match world on fire. And then, hey, Ryan, we're going to need these to run real fast.
That's when you kind of say, hey, this thing is awesome, but sorry about it. Got to go.
Yeah. So how'd you handle that?
So at the beginning, the really only aluminum tip experience that I could base off of was the 50 cal AMAX. We had a bullet that we put aluminum tip in that.
You put a whole nother bullet on top of the bullet. That thing is
it's
huge.
Like the size of a 30 cal 175 bullet, basically. But even that is way different than what the A-tips ended up being. So it was kind of it was a learning curve for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, feeding that tip and really the geometry of that jacket, what room you leave for that jacket to form into around the tip is way different than the polymer tips. Because the polymer, it's still, regardless of what specific polymer it is, it will squeeze some.
Yeah, it's compressible.
It'll compress. You can squeeze that copper into it a little bit, and you can kind of make it do what you want a little easier. The aluminum, copper going into aluminum, it doesn't like to just squeeze and go wherever it's kind of rigid there. I mean, it's malleable compared to steel or anything, but in a bullet forming process, you need to give room for that copper to go. You want that tip to be secure, like you said. It can't spin, it can't move back and forth. That needs to be completely rigid. And at the same time, it needs to be a seamless transition. And that was the biggest thing. I remember taking that first 153, that Trampus, when we first made those first ones. Like, that's the smoothest looking tip to jacket transition I've ever seen.
Finish
that is perfect.
Yep.
And how you edge finish it too is a big deal. But there's a ton of variables there. The surface finish on the shank of the tip, like the back end of the tip that's buried in the projectile that nobody ever sees. The surface finish there is important because when you're shoving that in a jacket, there's a chance that you have interference there and you can scrape aluminum off of that tip, and then it gets into tooling and causes issues. The speed at which you're feeding it, just a lot of variables there. But the packaging sequentially I thought that was cool. I didn't really have anything to do with that. We have a team of guys that designed that stuff. I thought it was the coolest thing ever when they first got that thing.
Dude,
it was cool.
Running,
because you
just
have
filling in a tray one by one in order.
I've shown the A-tip packaging process to a select few people that I'll bring in for tours, sponsored guys, outdoor media, stuff like that. Guys that are in the know, they sign the NDA because we don't show that stuff to everybody. And every time they're like, "Do you guys have like mechatronic, robotic guys in here?" Like, we got 2 guys from Nebraska that just figured it out. That's what we got. And to see this machine operate, you would think those guys have, all kinds of robotics backgrounds, and they don't. They just, they have obviously some formal education, but not in robotics. And they just got it done. They figured it out, and it works. It works well.
It works well.
Yeah, I think now it's kind of just taken for granted because it's just a product that's been around for 6 years now. It's running, but like, hey man, that's actually pretty cool that we're packaging those things sequentially. Nobody else is doing that still. No. But yeah, that's pretty cool. The other thing I wanted to mention was how much we made it more difficult on ourselves to make those things shoot so much better than the standard we hold the A-tips to compared to anything else is, by all definitions, improbable, but we make it happen.
So we have a hunting bullet standard, we have a match bullet standard, and there's some nuance depending on the product within that.
Right.
But the match bullet standard is certainly no slouch.
No.
Like our ELD match bullets, ELD-X bullets, they pound knot holes. They're really impressive. The A-tip turns it to 11, just past the click.
Yeah, we decided, should we make these held the same standard as match bullets? No, these got to shoot better. What's it going to be? Okay, we should make them shoot this.
Well, we shot some of the early ones though, and they're
easily
like incredible.
Right.
Like, I'd never seen it before.
Well, when you're talking like 10-shot groups at 200 yards that are 4, 5, 6/10 of an inch, and then you shoot a subsequent 10-shot group and it's 4, 5, 6/10 of an inch, you're talking legitimate quarter-minute bullets, which you've heard all of our sample size podcasts. That just doesn't happen. Like, like that just doesn't exist. And you guys are making it happen.
And now we make it happen on a routine basis. Does it take work? Absolutely.
Sure.
Everything has to be right. But when those things are made right, they're phenomenal. It's incredible.
Through that process, we've been forced to constantly progress in how we form a jacket, how we course seat and swedge up a bullet.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff has just progressed over the past, basically since we started doing A-tips, in order to keep achieving that standard.
Well, that's a good point, because we've been known for our AMP bullet jackets, the advanced manufacturing practices, which is, just the fancy words for saying just the engineering process of how we draw jackets. You don't have a bullet that's accurate without a good jacket. And you can start with a good jacket, and taking that cup, the finished product, it's got however many draw processes, 13, 14 different maneuvers and, 4, 5, 6 draw procedures before it gets a core in there. At any one of those, you can take the world's perfect jacket and ruin it. And we're talking tenths of a thou of concentricity can cause that bullet to be friggin' 0.4 of an inch at 200 yards to minute and a half. And people might not appreciate how tight those tolerances are. And I said it goes through all those draw processes. How much you draw in each process. Is that what you're talking about? How you refine the process?
Yeah. The wall thickness profile from bottom to top of a jacket, we play with that. We're talking thousandths here and there on a draw punch. Thicker here, thinner here. Where do you want to put a transition in thickness relative to the base of the bullet as far as lengthwise? All that stuff, yeah. That all got put under microscope. The further along we got with ATIP and more production we had to keep up with. It's okay, we are making this on a mass scale now. We got to make these all the time, always this good. But, I mean, like you said, from a cup, we even went back to the cups. How can we improve us making cups? And we've got better since then.
Wow. So you got this product lineup. You have all the R&D that goes into it, years worth of study to make this. You get the product lineup. You send it to some guys that really want them. You announce them as a new product. What happened that first year when we released these as an official product?
Guys just won matches. I mean,
simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, Greg Hamilton at Proof Research is a pretty good friend of mine, and him and Sean Murphy, who used to do a lot of competitions together. I think they still
do. Yeah, not as many,
but man, they were hitting it heavy in that era. They wouldn't lose.
They still don't.
And as soon as they ran out, they were calling us like it's almost like a druggie or something.
Yeah, I gotta get some more of those.
Yes, that's what it was though. I need some more of those.
Yeah, and
I had never seen that from any of the products I had been a part of or here that we launched.
Not to that degree.
There's always like positive accolades or, hey, this is cool. It fits this use for me. But guys it was like an abnormal response on how bad they wanted those, which was pretty cool.
That is awesome. When you said kind of exactly what I teed you up for, which was just straight up won matches. Because you look at the sniper matches, the team matches, and then the PRS. It was golden bullets. We were, I think that's the year that Charles Roberts won tactical in PRS division. Was that year Tate Streeter might have won it, or Austin?
NRL, then it was Austin and Clay.
Won, and Clay. There was golden bullets everywhere. It was week after week after week. A-tips were winning matches. And one of the biggest feedback things that we got that I didn't experience until I started shooting them better was the signature on the steel. That is a small nuance that once you have it, it's like a superpower. Because so what really separates great shooters from good shooters is the small details. Every 1/10 of a mil matters. And what they're looking at is, okay, I got the hit and I'm about to move to the next target. Well, where did I hit it specifically? And not everybody knows to look for that. They hit the steel, they're moving on. Well, these guys, these top level competitors, they're looking, where exactly did I hit that target? And with the A-tip, there's no doubt where you hit the target.
That silver spot shows up pretty good. Yeah, that's what we were. I mean, in culmination, that our internal testing had said, look, these bullets should give you an extra few points. You change nothing else. Max, I remember saying that. You change nothing else. Just put these bullets in there. You should gain points from the drag.
Just from the drag variability. Yeah,
absolutely.
You're going to pick up 1 or 2 points.
And then now, when that arena got so hyper competitive that a point or two, a lot of times, won or lost a match.
Separates first through fifth sometimes.
Sure, and they put these bullets in their rifle, didn't change anything else, and they gained 2 or 3 points throughout 2 days or 5 points, whatever. Now they're beating the field by 5 points. 5 or 6. it's just unheard of, you know. So
Yeah.
that was.
I do remember that. I think Jayden might have said that, or whoever said it first, but that's true. If you're a competitor at a given level and you're shooting, say, a bowtail hollow point option, if you do nothing but throw in the A-tip, all else equal, you will score 1, 2, 3 points higher per match just from that one that we talked about, the core geometry and that, you know, the dynamic stability, and then 2, the drag variability reduction.
Yep.
You are getting a more consistent bullet. The further away you shoot, the better performance increase you will see. And there are few things that you can just, this is just a bolt-on. I don't do anything else. I'm already shooting bullets. I just choose this one over that one. Instant. It's like different fuel. You know, you got a hot rod. Well, okay, when I run 91 octane, my car runs fine. And then I put some 101 leaded in there, and I can feel the difference. The times on the track are better or whatever.
Right.
Like, there is a difference just by making a more competitive choice. And that's really cool to bring a product like that to market in an already hyper-competitive environment. And now you got people straight winning matches. So that was like that 2019, 2020 timeframe where we owned those matches, it seems
18,
like.
19, 20, 21.
Mhm.
I don't remember all the dates and who, and I just know that
Yeah.
it was in there. It was a
lot.
We were knocking them down pretty good.
Yep, I like it. You guys, obviously you guys shoot a lot. Do you have a particularly favorite A-tip bullet?
The Hornady Rapid Safe Keypad Vault offers quick, dependable access to your firearm while providing security from unauthorized users. The Rapid Safe Keypad Vault is constructed of a heavy-duty 14-gauge steel housing and thick steel lid for tamper-proof security. The included RFID watch band tag and RFID decal can be selectively programmed to open this safe and any other Rapid Safe you own. The Rapid Safe Keypad Vault from Hornady Security.
Is there any of those bullets that give you a warm and fuzzy?
Why are you always making us choose stuff on this podcast?
I'll tell you why.
Near and dear to our heart, and you're like, which is your favorite child?
I'll tell you why, if you guys want to know. Good friend of mine, Ruben, if you're listening, he had said when he's listening to podcasts, a lot of times, if you listen close and you read between the lines, people will tip their hand to maybe some products that just by nature are just the ones. And I've listened to podcasts that he's been on, and I've noticed as well, like, wow, he always recommends X or whatever it is. And I'm sure there's some subtlety to it that, yeah, there's like, if I have to say, pick an A-tip and go win a match, I'm going to say pick, the 6mm 110, or if you're going to go with 6.5, shoot the 153 or whatever. Not that they're all not good. There's just some that's just, I don't know what. There's just got this intangible thing about
magic in the box.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, back to your favorite child of the A-tips. Do you guys have a favorite?
Oh, can I have at least a couple of caveats?
Yes, I was going to say if you want to wait, Ryan, you want to go
I
first?
can go, because mine's, honestly, I don't shoot much of these, because I don't do the PRS style match shooting, but mine's coming from the design side and seeing every one of these projectiles from its infancy and just a paper, drawing on paper. I would say my favorite would be the 250 grain 30 cal, just because.
Yeah, buddy.
He stole
the
it
changes,
from me.
but mine's different reasons, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The changes the accommodations we had to make that size of projectile with the tooling footprint that we have, it was a bit of a challenge, and it's just a monster.
That's a humble understatement, Ryan. That was
bit of a
new
challenge.
blocks.
It was
new
improbable
feeds,
is
new
what it
die
was.
sets. I mean, you're stating that mildly, the hurdles you had to jump through to make that work.
yeah.
Yeah.
But,
If you're going to shoot a big 30, that's the big 30.
yeah, the tip. I mean, even the tip footprint, like that aluminum tip specifically was meant for those two big 30 cals, and it's used nowhere else. It doesn't fit in any other projectile. It's meant for those. Just like all the A tips are that way, but that one at the
It's
time
just
it was
cool.
in a window. We were not feeding anything like that, so everything was new tooling wise. Everything's completely different.
Like your draws that long, your die blocks are deep, I mean, everything. It was, you had to do a lot of work.
Well, that's a cool bullet. And if the listener hasn't, you put one of those things in your hand, you'll swear it's a 338. I've often mistaken just grabbing bullets. Oh, those are 338s because they look huge. Jayden, we'll go to you.
Well, Ryan stole mine.
Well, he's a thief.
So I got nothing to say now.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, the 250 was. It's just a ridiculous bullet. There's no, like, take a lineup of bullets and you say, which one do you want? You're gonna want that one. Like, just look at it. You know, it's ridiculous. I remember getting the first set of those, Ryan, and trying to figure out what powder am I going to use? Like, what do you even do with this?
Yeah.
A 250 grain 30 caliber bullet. Like,
Put it in a 300 PRC.
It was such a leap away from what was known at that time. And it works really good. And I've been beaten up by a lot of 338 Lapuas in my time. Had many a headache from those things. I hate them. And when that 250 just run laps around a Lapua and you can lay down and shoot it all day long from the prone with a 16-pound gun, 20-pound gun, and you're fine.
Yeah.
Like,
put a Thunder Beast on there and run
that's it. Yep.
Was that the ones where we went and shot groups at a mile and 2,000 yards? I'm almost certain we shot groups at
we did.
legit 10-shot groups at distance with those, and they were like incredible compared to anything else we had
bullet
shot.
on top of bullet on top of bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking like mile groups that were like 11 inches.
I remember
12, they were phenomenal. Like, they were incredible.
Shooting some of those groups. I remember shooting in the afternoon at the range in Lexington and having a conversation in my head about, you know, what the wind's been doing all day, because I've been sitting behind the computer and watching the wind, and then thinking like, all right, well, you know, we're starting at 1640, I think. So, man, I should be able to, you know, the wind's been really consistent. And then the other part of my brain was like, you cocky SOB, you're talking about how small of a group you think you can shoot at 1,640 yards. You're lucky to hit the damn steel. And then lay down and shoot a sub-minute group at 1,640. Yeah. It's just remarkable. And you just push it out and it just works. So the 250 is, you know, one of my favorite terms. It's an absolute juggernaut.
Yeah, it's a special one. One of mine would be the 153s.
Yep.
Because you put those in, I mean, especially where we shoot west of the Mississippi, you put those in a Creedmoor for like a match setting, and there's just something about those with condition. I mean, if you hit a plate, you're gonna hit the plate again. That's what's nice about those in variable conditions.
You pick a wind, it works. You're gonna hit that.
And you're gonna hit it. So I really like the consistency, the flight characteristics of that projectile. To me, are really cool. Along with the 250. Yeah. And if you're gonna shoot a 6mm, you got to shoot a 110.
Yeah. Well, the 153, I agree. I don't know. There's something intangible and magical about the 153. The 135 is a great bullet.
Great bullet.
Even in a Creedmoor, you throw in the 153, toss that thing out there like 2,600 and maybe 25 feet per second. Clay Blackadder won one of the hardest PRS matches in the country shooting 153s at 2,650. It's just, there's something intangible about a big, heavy for caliber bullet. Just let the efficiency of the bullet do the work.
Absolutely.
Yep. I think for me, if I had, you guys have all, well, except for you, pick two. The 6mm for me is one that that's just the go-to. I'm not a great competitor, but I pick up more points because of it. I see my impact on the target with it, and I don't have to stand on anything for velocity. A lot of us now compete with 6mm arc. Well, I can toss out a 110 at 2,750 or 2,800 out of a 6 arc safely, not juice to the gills for pressure, and just let the bullet do the work.
And you can see your shots. There's no recoil. Yeah.
And then I wouldn't be a 7mm disciple if I didn't say that 190. I mean,
that's an efficient bullet.
That thing is unreal. It really is. Out of, you know, some of those hot rod 7s, the 7 PRC, or if you build something crazy, some super long throat 28 nozzler with the right twist or 7 rum or anything, that 190 is just, it's a cruise missile. It's absolute awesomeness.
And then do you remember when we shot, the other one that deserves it is the 375.
Oh,
when we shot those out to 20 some hundred or whatever and grouped those things, that one is a special, just hammered. I don't know what else to say. That bullet was phenomenal.
Do you favor this, when we're talking large cal, do you favor the smaller large cal stuff?
I do, because I'm a sissy.
Well, I didn't know if there's anything, you know, ballistically. I've heard that a lot of people that shoot 375s, 408s, 416s, and they like the 375s for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think it's a sweet spot of weight, velocity, splash signature on target, shootability, you know, kind of that whole package wrapped up.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of the the pinnacle.
It's the same principle as a 300 PRC versus 338. Once you make the next jump up, the 375 is just a little more easy.
Well,
just like that
in that world of ELR and large cal, that's another huge benefit to the A-tip. You know, we've seen these ungodly shots. You know, Shane and Jacqueline Bryan out of Olathe, Kansas. I mean, they've shot, I don't even know, 4,000 yards and stuff using A-tips. In that ELR world, signature is huge. Where did that bullet land? And when you got a lathe turned solid that bores a hole into the dirt, it's not super helpful when you're 3,000 yards away. You get a lead core, I'm going to use the term thin jacketed, but that's a relative term because they're pretty darn thick, that hits the dirt and it blows up and dirt sprays everywhere. And you go, oh,
that's where it hit.
It hit right there. Let me make that correction. That's a huge advantage to the competitor.
I would say it's a more important metric than aerodynamics for that.
You're seeing splash.
Yeah, because you can have the best aerodynamics in the world, but if you don't see where the bullet goes, because you're going to miss at those distances, it's going to happen.
Yeah, not if you do your part.
That's right. Yeah, quarter M away all day. But you have to see it.
Yeah,
and so I haven't seen anything out there that gives you the signature that the A-tips do. That's another thing with the 250s. I've shot a lot of 250s out at 2,500 meters, and I did a test one time. I think I did 70 shots at 2,500 meters, and this was in like a shale rock, foot to 2 foot tall grass, kind of sparsely, is down in Texas. And there was only 3 shots out of those 70 at 2,500 meters that I didn't see the splash on.
Wow,
that's incredible.
It was pretty good odds.
Yeah, you take a 225 grain class long range bullet and do that, and you might see 1 out of 2 or 3 shots.
Yeah.
So big improvement.
Big
going
improvement.
To the 250.
Awesome, guys. Well, the A-tip project, it was cool to jump in kind of at its infancy a little bit and see all the work that you guys did and to really see it be the premier long range match bullet now. It's very satisfying, and I'm hoping that you guys find some some inspiration from seeing that to continue to innovate and continue to develop, because that's, when I think about A-tip as a long-range match bullet, every other long-range match bullet outside of the lathe-turned solids just being different for the sake of being different, everything else is the same technology.
Right.
There's very few real innovations, and the A-tip, exemplifies a lot of that, where it's new draws, new jacket, new core seat, new tip material, new mass layout, new drag variability reduction technology. It's the most advanced match bullet on the market. And if you're shooting a bowtail hollow point today and you switch to the A-tip, you're going to pick up 1, 2, 3 points per match. Yep. And that's just by switching the bullet. So I don't know. I'd say job well done, guys. Is there anything else in the world of A-tip that you want to talk about the development, or do you think we missed?
I think we nailed it pretty good. I know it's been a pretty satisfying project for me over the years. One of the top 3,
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Look back at Prince after he talked about doing this podcast. It's like, man, when was that when we first did it? That's been a quick 6.5 years now, because I looked back, it was the end of 2017 when I was drawing the first prints for the 6.5-153.
Wow.
So early 2018 we made the first bullets. So time kind of has flown there.
Time has flown.
We built those first ones in April. I remember it vividly. It was springtime, and we went out and shot them, and these things are awesome.
Yeah. To me, it's cool that, to your point, Ryan, 6.5 years later, that the products, the whole product line is still being produced and it's still in demand.
Mm-hmm.
Because if all of the things that we're claiming about the product were untrue, or just, the marketing hype, or, all those, anecdotes that you get accused of, I don't think they would still be here, because they're not cheap compared to 100%. Historical bullet prices. And that was a concern we had early on, is like, is this thing going to go or not? Like, are people going to be willing to invest this much money just to see if our claimed performance benefit is observable in their experience? And I think at this point you can't argue that it has been.
Yeah, News 11, this just in. Yes, people are willing to pay for that performance benefit.
Yep. Pretty cool.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You bet.
Yep.
Good to be here.
Fun.
Guys, thanks for tuning in to the deep dive into the A-tip bullet. We hope that the peek behind the curtain in the development and the manufacturing processes and the testing and all of the geometry and the DVRT that came out of it was enjoyable to you. We'll catch you on the next one.